Hello, everybody. My name's Mike Cribb. I'm speaking to you from the UK, and this is a follow-up session to Revizto sessions we've done previously, which had focused on primarily on reviewing 2D information, so drawings and documents. This session will move on to we'll refresh some of what we covered previously, but it will focus mainly on reviewing 3D models. But like I said, I'll try and refresh and go back over some of the issues that we've talked about previously in 2D and 3D. I'll explain a bit about how you navigate in 3D models and move around. We'll cover cutting sections in models so that you can see what you need to be able to see. We shall cover measuring between objects, and then how to hide and show and isolate different models or different parts of models, and a bit at the end about properties and how we can use those and how you can use those in reviews. In each of the Revizto projects, there's a guidance document which I will refresh to include today's content, but it also covers previous things we've talked about previously. So the basic process of creating comments and issues, navigation, creating issues, and so on. So something to take away from this is that if you are ever in a Revizto project and you want to access some of this information, then if you go to the 2D, hit the 2D icon here and this gallery button, there will always be a guidance folder, and in there will be the latest version of the guidance document. Okay, so the first thing we're just going to cover is when you go into Revizto, there are three environments. There's the 2D environment that you'll probably already be familiar with from having looked at 2D drawings and documents. There's the 3D environment, and there's the issue tracker. And you switch between them just by clicking. So I can move from the 2D into the 3D. This is a test example project that I've set up that after the training I'll give everybody access to, so that you can practice the things we've talked about today before implementing on the real projects. So to move between the three, there's 2D, the 3-dimensional, and the issue tracker. Before I go any further, when moving around a 3D model, it's worth having a consistent set of preferences set. So I'm just going to go click on preferences here, and this is in English, but in your version, if you've got Spanish selected, you'll see this in Spanish. But one of these tiles relates to navigation, and in here, navigation mode, there are a series of options. Now I use, the default is this Revizto option, and I suggest that you keep that. But if you are very familiar with using Revit or SketchUp or Navisworks, or that you do a lot of gaming, and you're familiar with navigating models in one of those environments, then if you select one of those alternatives, the sort of mouse controls and the way you move around will be more similar to one of those options. But for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to stick with the Revizto default. So with the Revizto default, there are a few basic ways to move around with your mouse. You can zoom in and zoom out with a mouse wheel. If you left click, you see a little icon comes up, and that allows you to move around, rotate the model around that little flashing icon there. That's the most useful way of spinning models around is a left click. If you right click, the whole model moves sort of globally, but it's not quite as easy to maneuver yourself around. So I favour left click and moving around that way. And then if you press and hold the middle button or the wheel, you can move the model all around. So it's worth practicing left click, right click, and using the mouse wheel to zoom in and out of models. Now I'm just quickly going to refresh on how we create comments. So I'm going to do that in the 2D environment. I'll just select a drawing. So hopefully this is a reminder from what we've covered previously. But in the 2D environment, if I see something that I'm not happy with when undertaking a review, then I raise an issue using the stamp button. And when I hit the stamp button, I get a series of options come up down here based on the discipline. So in this case, I'm going to raise a structural issue and an error. In the actual project models, I've updated the stamps so that the title and the stamp types are all in English and Spanish. So I choose my stamp and I place it in the model, and that then brings up this dialog box here. So I can first of all set the priority of how significant I think the issue is. So I can make that critical, which would be a status C, or minor, which would be a status B, or none, which would be a status A. So in this case, has it gone? In this case, I'm going to say minor. So I've set the priority, and then I'm going to click on this chat button, and I can write my comment here. There should be a joint here, whatever my comment is, and this is the comment that gets exported out and reported to the contractor. And once I've done that, that's the minimum I need to do when raising an issue. There are other things I could do. I can add other tags. So if this affected the civil engineering and maybe architecture, I can add those tags. So then they appear here. Or if I wanted to assign this issue to somebody else to deal with, then I could choose someone there from that list. So that might be, for instance, a UKDT person might want to seek some input from somebody from DISS or ARCC, and so they could assign that issue to the individual and vice versa. But that's all I need to do. So that's a quick reminder of raising an issue. You find a drawing, or you select a stamp, place it, and add information. Now in a 3D environment, it's exactly the same. I could, from this view, I could add a stamp. I don't know, again, let's say an architectural error, and perhaps I could place it in the model, and again write my comment and set the priority. But often in models, what we're more likely to want to do is, or what's going to be more helpful is we're likely to want to zoom in on particular issues. So what I'm just going to go through now, the first part is about cutting sections so that you can better see what but better see what's going on in the model. So to cut a section, I'm just going to use the click on this scissors icon. And once I've clicked on that, there are two options. There's plane and there's box. So I'm going to start off with the plane. If I have the plane selected, oops, then you see this green object. And if you click on the end, this end of the object, I can stick that onto any surface. So if I stick it onto that vertical surface, then I can pull a section in that direction. Okay, so and if I wanted a section looking down, then I could again click on this end and stick it to a horizontal surface, and then by using this end, I can pull that up and down. So for the purposes at the moment, I'm going to create a vertical sort of slice through the building. So that's how you do a plane. And that if you stick that on something that's angled, it will sort of create like an angled cut. But generally you want to stick it on a vertical or horizontal surface and then pull and push. So that's how a plane works. That just creates a basic plane through the model, and when you finish, you can just hit the cross, and then I could zoom in and create an issue in the normal way in there. Say, let's close that. So back to the section cut. The other option is a box. Clear that first. So the other option is a section box. So if I click that, a little green box comes up there. And if I need to click on that to activate it. And then there's a series of controls here. So the first one is push and pull the face of this section box. So if I click here, I can pull that face that way. If I click here, I can pull that face that way, and I can pull this up. If I want to move sort of that face out that way, then I hold down the control button. You see a little tick has come on here. I hold down the control button, then that allows me to pull that surface, and similarly that surface. So the ones that are kind of hidden from me. So with a section box, with this icon, I can sort of move the boundaries of the box. The next one is this one that allows me to scale the box. So perhaps I'm zoomed in too much there. I can click on any surface and pull out, and that will sort of shrink and expand the box that I'm looking at. So maybe I'll zoom out a bit more. Next one allows me to move it. So in fact, let's just make that a bit smaller. Oops. This allows me to move a box. So up and down, or in and out, depending on which. So if I click on this face, that will allow me to move it that way. If I click on this face, it will move it that way. And the top surface, like that. So that's the move. And then the last one is rotate. So that allows me to rotate it round horizontally or vertically. And if I've got myself a bit lost, I can clear that, and I could just hit there's a clear button. I could hit a new one, start a box, and then sort of start again. So they're the two types of section cuttings. I tend to find that I use the plane option more than boxes. I just find it a bit easier to see the overall context, and then I can zoom in on what I'm interested in. So, and then like I say, when I'm happy with where I am, I can then close that button. So now I've got a section through the building cut. The next thing I might want to do is to do some measurements. So to do that, I can use the ruler. So I click on the ruler, and there's a 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 5 options here. The first one is like a laser range. It gives you the distance between two surfaces. So if I click on that and new, you see this laser pointer. If I stick it on that surface, it'll tell me it's 7.525 meters to this wall. If I stick it on that surface, it's 4 meters between there and there. If I stick it on that, stick it on that surface, I can see that room is 2.4 meters wide. So that is simply just, imagine like a laser going from one object to another object. The next option is it allows you to snap between points. So, oops, maybe. And when it's yellow, it hasn't snapped to a point. But when it goes green, that's snapped to that point. And let's find one. Oops. Let's find something a bit easier. There you go. So between that point and that point is 2.58 meters. So that could be useful, perhaps maybe to see the distance between the end of that handrail and that one, maybe, if you're interested in stair geometry. So that's point to point. The minimum distance will tell you the minimum distance between 2 objects. So if I selected that object, so I've just left clicked on that stair and that stair, it's told me that the minimum distance between those 2 objects is 300 millimeters, which I expect is probably sort of this location here. If I clicked on that object, and so I'm just going to come out into an area. It's a bit easier to see this. So this is distance between 2 objects. So if I select that object by left clicking and that object, and minimum distance is 7.7 meters. So this might be useful if you are wanting to check things like minimum corridor widths, or perhaps head height in an area that is needed for maintenance, or something like that. So that's just allows you to select two objects, that and that, and what's the distance between them, or I could, that column and that beam. Next option is this one, which tells you how high above the project datum something is. So I get a little yellow triangle and I can place that, and that tells me that's 14.4 meters above the datum. That's 17 meters. That's 14.35. 10.27, and so on. So I don't need to click anything here. I'm just moving it, and it's telling me what the level of that object is. So that can be useful. And the last one is slope. So I'm just going to try and find something with a slope. You go, there's some ramps here. So a little yellow thing. If I put slope on there, that's telling me that's a slope of 98 in a 1,000. There's no slope there. 98, no slope. Yeah. So that if you were looking at whether something was shallow enough gradient for someone in a wheelchair to be able to access part of the hospital or part of the school, then that can be a useful thing, just to quickly move it around and look for slopes. So that's measuring, and you can so that can be useful to you might then raise an issue on this ramp to say this ramp is too steep or whatever. So let's have a look. So that's the first. They're the sort of first most basic things. So navigating around the model, cutting sections, and measuring, which are the sort of the starting points then often for a review. The next thing I'm going to do is you might here we've got a model that has architecture and structure and some equipment in it, and maybe I'm carrying out an architectural review and really I'm only interested in that. I don't want to see the structural stuff at this stage. So the next thing we're going to cover is the object is using these. Sorry, is using these icons here. So the object tree, the properties box, and the find objects. So the first one, the object tree brings up here a list of models. Now in this case, this is a federated model, and if I expand that, it's made up of an architectural model, a structural model, and an equipment model. Now, depending on what I want to do, I might want to see all of these, one of them only, two of them, you know, or all of them. So let's imagine that I'm undertaking a structural review only, so I'm not interested in the other items. So I can right click on the architecture, and then when I select the architecture, it highlights all that in blue, and I can my first option is I can hide that, and I can right click on equipment and I can hide that. So now I'm left with, and you see they're grayed out now. So now I'm left with just the structure. So if I'm doing a structural review, that might be the first thing I do, because I'm in this stage I'm really only interested in looking at, say, the pieces of structure, the columns, the slabs, and so on. So that's option number one, is right click and hide, and I can reset by clicking this button, and I can unhide all. So that's everything back on again now. Next option is again right click. You can transparency, next one. So if I click on transparency, so here I could set the transparency of the architectural module to say 75%. So now if I'm doing my structural review, I'm still focused mainly on the structure, the stuff in red, but I can start to see in transparent how it relates to architecture, which might be useful to me, or might be useful if I want to highlight a clash or a coordination issue. So that is right click, transparency, and I have a number of options. And again, if I want to reset, I can reset the transparency of all. That's the next option. Then yeah, so if I now select the structural model and right click, isolate in transparency, that will show me, that will highlight the structural model. You see it's highlighted in blue, and it's made everything else transparent. So that's another way of achieving, of sort of quickly saying, I'm only interested in this, but I do want to see everything else, you know, for context. So let's just reset transparency. Or so if I did it the other way around, I could choose the architecture, and I could right click and isolate in transparency. So now I'm focused on the architecture, but I can see the structure ghosted in transparent. So in this way, you can start to refine what you're seeing, what you want to look at. The easiest, as I said, is just to simply to hide models, or you can be more sophisticated and right click and use this isolate in transparency. Now, in when we were reviewing documents in 2 dimensions, we tended to use discipline-specific stamps. But in 3 dimensions, there's a couple of more which we might choose to use rather than a discipline stamp. So I'll just show you those now. So imagine that there's something I want to highlight. I don't know, in this room. I've cut a section, I've set the transparency so that I'm seeing what I want to see, and there's an issue that I want to raise. So I can again use the stamp button. I'm just going to highlight a couple of stamps that are more useful in the 3D environment than in 2D, and they're found under the general section, and these are conflicto or clash and coordination. So if I was in reviewing this model, I saw a clash between architecture and say structure, then I could use this conflict button, and where I saw the conflict, I could stamp it, and then that's made a conflict issue, and then I would just tag that to say that's a clash between architecture and structure. Architecture and structure. So I wouldn't necessarily use a structural stamp for that, because really here it's affecting both structure and architecture. So instead I can use this clash button to say that's a clash between structure and architecture, or it might be between architecture and plumbing, or plumbing and electrics, or whatever. So this is a sort of stamp that you might use in 3 dimensions, but you wouldn't tend to use in 2D. And then, as before, I can make a comment. The structure, the structural column is clashing with the wall, whatever my comment might be, and that's positioned in the 3D model then. So in the future, if I were to find this issue again, it would take me back to this location in the model. The other one that you might use in 3 dimensions is just coordination. Coordination stamp. Maybe you're seeing something that isn't an actual conflict or an actual clash, but it's something that needs to be resolved between different disciplines. And in that case, you could select the coordination stamp, maybe place it in down here, and again select the disciplines that need to make the coordination. So in this case, architecture and structure again. And again, I could explain, you know, what needs to happen. So could the beam or column be moved to improve layout of this room? Whatever my comment might be, I can place it there. Okay, so you can see how being able to cut the model, hide or highlight different things can help you place stamps in a particular location that makes sense in the model. I'm just going to close use tracker. There's one more thing. If you wanted to, and I find this not particularly helpful, but you could right click on actually I'll just do it with the equipment. Right click, and you could set the color of that, or focus on objects, focus and isolate in transparency. That will highlight all the objects that are in part of this model and turn everything else transparent. So you can see that this equipment model seems to be sort of desks, chairs, bits of equipment. And it'll tell you what those bits of kit are. So that can be, oops, that can be quite useful to be able to just quickly, like I say, focus on objects or focus and highlight in transparency. If you can break these models down a bit more and see what's so there it's highlighting things that are level 3, those things are at level 2, and those are at level 1. In the structural model, we could choose the different floor levels. And there's something that looks a bit odd to me there, that all of that that's shown in blue is coming in as, oh no, that is at second floor, it doesn't look odd. So you can see, so as you click on things in this tree, they get highlighted, and then whatever you've got selected, you could highlight or isolate. Now, when I'm doing sort of high level reviews, the sort of functionality I've been through are the main things that I tend to use, because I'm generally looking around the model, looking for inconsistencies, looking for things that don't look right, and so being able to cut sections, isolate things, color them. Let's color that yellow. I'm not colored yellow. So just isolate that and make it yellow if I wanted to. Whatever helps with what I'm trying to do, and then I can always unhide everything and reset all the colors, reset the transparencies, and I'm back to my original model. But in BIM models, it's often not just the geometry we're interested in, it can be the properties as well. So we've just been looking at this, which is the object tree. And next to it, there's a properties box. So if I open that, whenever I'm moving around a model, if I hover over something for a moment, then it will bring up a little box which gives me some basic information. So this is a basic wall, and it's 150 millimeters wide. And this is a window, and it's 1200 wide and 600 high. And that's a window, and it's also 1200 and 600. This door is 1000 wide and 2.1 high. So as you hover over things, you get some basic information, the properties. But if you use this in this box, if I actually click on one of those, this let's look on this door, for instance, then in that object I've clicked on appears in my object tree. So it's highlighted here. And these are all the properties that exist in the model for that object. So you can see there's the type, the name, what level it's at, its area, its volume, it's in new construction, its width, the frame width, the height, all sorts of information is contained in there. So when I hover over it here, I get some information, but in this properties box is a lot more information. Now I can use that information to help me find other similar type objects. So for instance, let's work with doors. If I wanted to find all the doors, I can search in there, and this is finding all elements that are called door in the model. And if I right click and select isolate in transparency, that'll show me all the doors in the model. And if I click on any one of these, it'll show me where they are. So it's quite good to be able to use a sort of a free text search in here. No, sorry, I can't spell. I'll tell you what. Yeah, let's just go back to doors. So I've typed in there Puerta, that's fine, found all the doors here. If I click on one of those, that'll show me it in the model, and it'll give me all the properties for that door. And we can use those properties in a search. So if I open this object, this find objects button, the door I've got selected is 1 meter wide. If I wanted to find all the doors that were 1 meter wide, hang on. I can select that property, the width 1000, and I can use this find objects button and create new search. What that's done is in here, it's made me a little search that says, find me every object where the Revit width is equal to 1000 meters. That's 1000 millimeters. oops, 1000 millimeters. And then if I right click in the, sorry, if I then click on find all, that will show me all the doors that are 1 meter wide. But now I've got this set up for my doors, I could change it to show me the doors that are greater than 1000. And then it's, oh, I'm finding windows there. So I've used the wrong property. Now it's just showing me things that are wider than 1000. Let me just do that again. So let's go. Rivet type. There you go, length of door. If I do that this time and then hit new search, create new search. So previously the mistake I made just now, I searched for a dimension of 1000, whereas this time I've got length of door equals 1140. So if I find all those, that's all the doors with that dimension. If I want to find all the doors that are less than that, I can change that here and find all. And there's a lot. If I wanted to find the ones that were greater than that. So if I want, you know, maybe something I'm interested in is you know, can the piece of plant or and a piece of equipment be moved around the hospital through doors of a certain width, then I could set that here and say, well, I'm looking for everything that's wider than 1200 millimeters, and then find all. So then I could start zooming into the model and thinking, okay, is that okay? So is there a question?
No, someone's mic was
Okay,
open.
thank you. Right. So that can be useful to find objects of a particular type. Could do it with beams. And I could then create a search to find me all beams of a certain dimension, or a piece of plant or a piece of ducting of a certain size. So the properties, the object tree and the properties, and this search filter can be quite powerful. But if we obviously, let's just go back to in here there are a lot of
There's a question in the chat. Would you like me to read it now or later?
Can a clash detection be performed in Revizto as Navisworks manage? The next version of Revizto that gets released, I think, is coming out shortly, will have clash detection already in it. But if a clash detection has been done in Navisworks, then you can import those clashes into Revizto, and then you can sort of comment on them in Revizto. So if I can, yeah, so so in the future, Revizto will do clash detection within it, but at the moment, the way to do that would be via Navisworks, and then import those clashes into here. There's another question. Can you?
Yes, of course. Can you give the total of measurements, volume measurements of the columns, for instance?
I don't think so. So if I'm just going to turn off some. Let me just turn that off. Close that. Close. Hide. Hide. Right, so if I click on the column and the properties, it will tell me I will have the volume somewhere in here, but I don't think you could get like the total, add up the total volume of all of those columns. Yeah, so you couldn't get you couldn't get the total volume of all the columns. But what you might be interested in is setting up, let's just change that to default. So by default, if I click on an object, there's a lot of information here. And depending on what you're doing, what you're reviewing, you might only be interested in some of these sort of parameters. So for columns, for instance, you can set up favorites. See, there's a favorite option here. And to do that, I select the things that I'm interested in. So let's say I'm interested in the name and the type, perhaps whether the cover is internal or external, and this is good. Here you go, and perhaps the length and the volume and the area. If those are the things I'm interested in, say for a column, then I can select the things that interest me, and I can use this button to add it to favorites, and I'll make this favorites called columns. And what that means is that I'll just come back to, normally your default, you see all these items, but if I change the default here to columns, then the things I'm really interested in sort of float to the top here. So here, all the things I selected here, so the type, the name, the cover, the length, volume, all appear up here. And also now, when I hover over something, whereas earlier on when I hovered over something, I just got some really basic information. Now, anything I've selected as my favorites, when I hover over it, I can see what it is. So if for instance, there's a contractor's model that has reinforcement quantities embedded in it, that might be something we're interested in. So I could just hover over each of these and say, take a view on whether I agree with what's in the model or not. So I set up a search there for columns. You could do the same with windows or doors, so that every time you just hover over something, you're getting the information that's really important to you. So I think that can be quite useful. There's another question. Can we
just give me a second? Okay.
Yeah.
So can we bring Aconex besides the IFC models as well in Revit or Navis to take advantage of the double integration between both programs, Revizto and Revit?
Not sure I understand the question. you can bring into here a number of different types of models. So Revit, IFC, yeah, well, they'll be the main ones, Navis, and so on. So if you, and actually if you have an IFC in this, let's just close that, in this object tree, you might expand this and you might see a Revit model and an IFC and something else. So depending on what you want to look at, you can then sort of turn off the Revit model so you're only looking at the IFC or whatever. But the information will come through like that. If and this is not really something I think we'd do as reviewers, but if as the contractor I was working in Revit, then you can integrate Revit and Revizto so that you could raise you can raise an issue in Revizto, and you could, using this switchback, if it was connected to Revit, that would open Revit at that object. So if I wanted to say someone, well, you need to make this column bigger, then they could click on that in Revizto, switch back, and it would open that object in Revit for them to then edit. But as reviewers, it's probably not something we're going to be doing. Did I understand the question correctly, or could whoever it was rephrase it if I haven't answered it?
So he says, I meant because currently in the education projects, we are only uploading the IFC files via Aconex.
Okay. Yeah, so the IFC files that get uploaded via Aconex, they're then getting imported into Revizto. So I'm just going to open an education. Let's try this one. Bear with me 1 second.
And then there's another question suggestion. He says, could we check the electric circuits?
Yeah. The model I'm using at the moment doesn't have electric circuits in it, but if this one I'm opening here might. So let's just have a little look around. Right. So there's a lot going on here. So I'm going to go to this object tree. And I can see that there's a whole series of IFC files, and there are some Revit files. So let's say I expect the IFCs have been generated from Revit, so we probably don't need both. So I'm going to hide the Revit file. So now I'm only looking at IFCs, and then if we're only interested in electrical, I can right-click that and isolate. So in this model, that's all that exists in the electrical IFC model in this case. Let's just see what. I'm not too familiar with this model. Just turn off that Revit and hide that. Let's see if there's more in the plumbing. All right, I'm losing my bearings. Looks like I haven't chosen a very good model to try and look around. If you ever get lost, that home button is a useful button.
There's another question, which is, can we upload the files in Revit to connect the model in the cloud of Revizto and at the same time our computer?
Okay, sorry, can you repeat that?
Of course. Can we upload the files in Revit to connect the model in the cloud of Revizto and at the same time our computer?
You can upload, yeah, you can upload Revit models into the Revizto cloud. That's at the moment that's being done by the UKDT team. So when a model gets uploaded on Aconex, say a Revit model, then it gets uploaded into Revizto also ready for the review. So ordinarily you should be able to just access the models in the cloud straight in Revizto. So individually we shouldn't need to do uploading ourselves. I'm not sure if I've answered your question.
Okay, he's not telling me anything, but there are a couple of more questions. Like one person asks if we could see the tubing installation, and another question, what does the yellow exclamation point means in the lower part?
It's, yeah, so this explains why I'm having some problems with this file. I think these IFCs have come in, and this is saying there are 6 models which are very, very far away from each other. So this is probably where the models have come from. The IFCs have come from different models. So the architectural, the plumbing, the structural may all be in different locations, and therefore it's difficult to sort of navigate around. So that's a sort of an error message, that one down there. What I might do, just for the purposes of helping answer some of these questions, I'm going to open a project that I know has got, it's not a Peru project, but it's one that I know has got sort of various systems in it, just so we can sort of explore together how you might do some of these things. So this is a model that's got architecture and M&E and structure in, but I'm going to isolate in transparency the mechanical model. So there you can see the mechanical and electrical model highlighted in blue, with the architecture ghosted. So in this case, what we're interested in pipe work, plumbing, say. So that's the, there's some plumbing there. If I then did properties, I did search for pipes. Okay, so that's found me all the sort of pipes, the plumbing pipes. I could then, if what I wanted to know for the pipe work was, let's say, classification and category, whether it has what the overall size is, what the outside and diameter and inside diameter is. What else might I want to know? Plumbing. If those were things I was interested in, say, I could then create a little search set, which would then allow me to, as I hover over these things, I'm seeing that's 110 millimeter pipe with 104 internal diameter, and it's not there. That's a 42 millimeter pipe, and so on. So if you have a model, a lot of this, how well you can use this depends on how well the models are built, but you can see that you could quickly sort of try and find all the pipes or all the plumbing items, or in little search sets, and then therefore sort of review, home in straight away on those issues. So that's the tubes. What was Giancarlo email? Oh, that was the exclamation mark.
Yes.
So one thing with the models is that the works, that the contract information has a series of oops, hang on. Can you see that coming onto my screen? So yes. Part of the works information were asset information requirements. This one is for health. I assume there's a similar one for education, and this document sets out the requirements that the contractor models should include in terms of parameters and properties. So, for instance, and sorry, forgive me, I've opened the English worded version here. But here it has a series of attributes that should be in the model, but by the time it gets handed over, these are the attributes that should exist in the model for different objects, so that the facilities can be managed in the way that it's hoped in the future. So depending on what the object is, you might need to know its thermal transmittance or its security rating, or the number of air changes, or whether it's load bearing or not, whether it's used for clinical activities, those sorts of things. So in reviewing models, one of the things that we should be looking for, we should be aware of these attributes, and particularly as the projects come towards the later stages, we should be able to click on, you know, components. And start looking through the properties list to see whether all that asset information has been provided. And then of course you could create a favorite for that set of attributes, which would then allow you to hover over each, you know, an item and just see quickly has that information been provided, you know, or not. So that being familiar with these attributes that should be in the models is going to be quite important. Like I say, you wouldn't necessarily expect this information to exist in the early stages of a project, but certainly by the time it's sort of on being handed over construction or for completion, then this information will need to be included, and you could, you know, do some spot checks.
There are
to see whether they're there.
Yeah. One is, how can I see the slope of the tubing, for instance, of the pipes? Sorry. Mm-hmm. And the other one is, in the same way you uploaded the RVT files in the project that you're showing, can we do the education projects to take advantage of the double integration between Revit and Revizto?
So let's try that. I'll tell you what, I'm going to zoom in a bit here. So I'll just recap the sections while I'm here. So I'm going to make a box here. I'm just going to, oops. Right, let's, and then object tree, I'm just going to, hide that, hide that, hide. Right, I think I haven't done this before, but I think if that some of these pipes, I don't know whether any of these pipes would have a fall on them. Let's have a look. So if I go to this measure and I select this slope, no, that's not telling me the right thing. I don't know is the answer to that. If it was a property, like if one of the properties was gradient, then you could identify that. I don't know. I'm not a plumber, so I don't know whether that is something that would often be built into a model or not. But if it was in the way that, say, air changes are, or you know, flow rate, then you could add that as a favorite to your add that property as a favorite, and then when you hovered over something, you would see it. So I haven't. Yeah, I was thinking that this gradient thing might help, but I think what it's really doing is finding the gradient of that surface rather than like the center line or anything. What was the other question?
The other one was, just as in the same way that you uploaded the files in RVT in the project that you're showing,
yeah,
could we do the education projects in the same way to take advantage of the double integration between Revit and Revizto?
Yeah, I think we could. I don't. So there are Revit models. I think, well, from what I've seen in education so far, something that's happened is that initially the contractor supplied a lot of IFC models, and so they were imported into Revizto. And then subsequently in later submissions, some Revit models came in, and it was getting very confusing in that there were sort of multiple models showing the same thing all on top of each other. So at the moment, I think it's IFC models that are going in for education, but there's no reason that we couldn't do the Revit models in exactly the same way as we've done as we would do for health. I don't think we've seen any health Revit models yet. The example I've been using is from an older, the Pronis design from a sort of year ago or so. But yeah, if you think it'd be more useful to have the Revit models than the IFCs, or to have them as well as IFCs, then that could be done. Any other questions?
One just popped up. Revizto has the option of timeliner of the progress of the project. I'm sorry. Does Revizto have the option of timeliner to see the progress of the project in the same way that is offered by Navisworks?
No, not directly. I suppose they're trying to do different things. So no is the first answer. And by the timeline of the project, is that thinking in terms of the sequence in which it gets built, or looking at whether things have already been built on site or not? What aspect of the timeline are you interested in?
So it says the progress of the project to check if we are on time with the delivery dates.
And in time with the delivery dates when actually on site, physically on site.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I haven't done this myself, but the way I have seen this done is that let's just focus just on what you can do, and I can circulate a video on this. You can create your own property, even if it doesn't exist in Revit. You can create your own property in Revizto to be whatever you want. So you could have a property that is says it's been built or completed on site, not completed on site. So a kind of, has it been built, yes or no? You could set that as a parameter here, and then if as then items were built, or if you were a supervising engineer on site, say, and you saw that, okay, these items have been built, then you would change that property from not built or built no to built yes, and then you'd see that a different color. So you'd start to see. Sorry, excuse me, my daughter's. I'm from school. I need to let her in. 1 second, hang on. Thanks, Dad. Hello, sorry. Yeah, so I'll circulate a little video because it's quite neat. You just set a custom parameter that is, has this been built, yes or no? And then if it has been built, that can just be set to yes. And then you color things that have been built green and things that haven't been built red. And that way, if you're sort of monitoring the works on site, then you can sort of do that. Or if it's a contractor's responsibility to do that, you say, right, this is how we want you to present the information. So anytime you could sort of then come into the model and see, you know, what has and hasn't been constructed, and then obviously compare that with where you expect it to be in the program. Would that be useful if I send that video around?
Yes, please, they say.
Okay. And then the other thing to note is if you wanted to do that, then and you were doing that on site, then the way I would do that is have the Revizto model on an iPad, and then you know, just as you're going around site, you just literally select items and mark them as built, and then that will, when you're then back online again with access to the cloud, that will then update in the model, and you can see what's happening.
So one of the questions is, by which means would we look at the deliverable in 4D?
4D being time with time. So I think if you want to sort of a timeline that you can sort of slide forwards and backwards, you know, to see where things were at a particular time, then I think you'd probably do that in something other than this. That probably Navis. But if what you're trying to do is record at a point in time what stage things are at, then you could do it in the way that I just described. Any other questions or anything you want me to cover again? I'm conscious of time.
Yes, I'm reading here. Good morning. Question. Can we get a report of the amount of elements or the progress built and what's pending to be built? I think you answered that, like a percentage or graphs.
I'd have to think about that. I'm going to write that down. Percentage of. Yeah, I'll think about that. I'll send you an answer.
And
yep.
I told them, and then they said they should place within properties the gradients of the turbines because it's quite important for sanitary facilities to be able to provide a good result out of the project. So those.
Yeah. So, and I think you know, when in getting the first. So in receiving a model, if I'm looking at the plumbing, then I suppose the first thing I'd do would be to find the plumbing model, click on one of the pipes that should have a gradient, and then scroll through these properties and see if there has that been included as a property. And if it hasn't, then I'd make that comment back to the contractor and say, you know, you need to include a gradient property in as an attribute of all the plumbing elements, you know, and then that would go back to the contractor for them to action. And that's why I think similarly, you know, some of these attributes that are sort of unusual or specific, a specific client requirement, won't necessarily be in automatically, so the contractors will need to add them in. So again, that's why sort of looking for those and flagging up to the contractor early that those parameters need to be there is important. And I've certainly made that comment in looking at some of the BIM execution plans that we've received. We've pointed the contractors to that document to say, please don't forget to include these attributes. Any other questions? If there aren't any other questions, I think what I might do, based on the questions that there've been, is I'll invite everyone to this test project that's called Yungay Revizto 5 test. It's just called that because I happen to have used an old Yungay model. It's got architecture and structure in it at the moment, so I think I'll try and add some mechanical, electrical, and plumbing into it, and then you can just explore the things we've talked about today. So cutting sections, colouring and filtering and isolating, and looking for properties, using the properties to find things in the 3D view. And just a reminder that there's sort of the basics that we've talked about are covered in this guide that's in the model. So it covers the 2D, the process of creating issues all the way through, creating stamps, adding information, marking up if you need to mark up in a model or in a drawing, writing comments, and then there are some, where is it? Yeah, some frequently asked questions, which are questions that have been cropping up as people have been carrying out the reviews to date on the 2D information. So I just need to get the answers to these translated, and then I'll get those uploaded into each of the Revizto projects as well. So that's always a good resource. And then the stuff we've gone through today is covered in the last section. So I hope that's useful. Like I say, I'll send invites to this test model and have a play. And if it'd be helpful, we can